Hi everyone. So in this video, I'm going to go over how to make some SQL commands. How do we query SQL to do things like create databases, create tables, and then query that information to do things like add new records or update existing records or delete existing records. So let's get started. I'm using this website called dbfiddle.com, which allows us to pop in some SQL commands, run them, and make sure that they work. So I'm going to start over here with some schema commands. Schema commands are what we're going to use to structure our database. So I'm going to start off by creating a new database. So I'm going to type in the keywords create space database space and then a name for our database. So I'm going to call this new underscore DB. Then I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of my line. So in this line, I've told SQL to create a new database and name it new DB. So next, I need to tell SQL to use this new database for any future commands. So I'm going to type in use new underscore DB semicolon. So this is telling SQL, hey, for the commands I'm about to give you, I want you to use this new database. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a table. You can kind of think of SQL databases as really elaborate Excel spreadsheets where we have different tables with columns and rows. So I'm going to create a new table that's going to have some student information in it. So I'm going to first start off with create space table space and then the name of the table I want to create inside of this database. So I'm going to call this new underscore table. So then I'm going to do a space and an opening parenthesis. And now this is where I'm going to put in the different columns that I want to have inside of this database. So the different bits of information that I want this database to be able to hold. So I'm going to first start off with a column called ID. I want this ID column to only store integers or numbers. I want it to auto increment. And I want this value to never be null. So let's go over this really quick. So I have first the name of this column. So the name of the field. And I'm calling it ID. We can call it whatever we want. Next is the data type. So the type of data this column can store. Here, int means integer. So it's a digit. A number of some kind. So next I can put in some special features that I want this particular column to abide by. So I have auto increment, which means for every single new record, we're going to increment that ID by 1 and automatically inject it into this field. And then finally, I want this column not to be null. This means that we can never save a record without the ID field being filled. So next, after a comma, I'm going to put in the second column that I want to add. So I'm going to call this one name. I want it to be a varchar that holds 255 characters, and I want it to never be null. So again, we're naming this field name. We want it to have various characters, which is just like a string in other programming languages. We want it to have a maximum size of 255 characters, and we can never save a record without this field being filled. So I'm going to put another comma. Each of these different columns needs to be comma separated. So then I'm going to do another field name called cool, and I want this to be a boolean, so true or false value. And I want to set the default to true. So I'm creating a new column called cool. The type of data it's going to store are boolean values. And by default, if we don't put any specific information into this field, it's going to default to true. I'm going to create another column called birthday, and I want the data that birthday is going to store to be a date. And then finally, I'm going to put a comma, and on my last line, I'm going to put in primary space key space parentheses ID parentheses. So a primary key is a field which uniquely identifies each record inside of a table. We're telling our database that for this particular table, we want the ID field, this first one that we created, this ID column, we want that to be the unique identifier for each record in this particular table. So finally, I'm going to jump down a line, put a closing parenthesis, and a semicolon to close this out. So let's go ahead and run this and make sure it works. I'm just going to click on this run button up here. It says it's running the query and the query executed successfully. So we know that there are no errors in our code. Let's move on to creating a new row or a new record. So over here on the right-hand side where I have my query SQL code, I'm going to first start off with use and then the name of the database, just like we did in our schema query. So I'm going to type in use new underscore DB semicolon. This is going to tell SQL that whatever commands come after this first line, I want these commands to be executed in the new DB database. So let's start off with something simple. We just want to insert some data into this table. So I'm going to type in insert space into space and then the name of the table inside of this database, which in this case is new underscore table space. And then inside of parentheses, I'm gonna type in the different columns that I wanna inject information into. So I'm gonna type in name, pool, and birthday. So then I'm gonna do a closing parenthesis, a space, and then the word values. And then in another set of parentheses, I'm going to fill out the values for each of these different columns in order. So the first one is going to be a name for this new record. Then I'm going to do a comma, and then the value for the next column, which in this case is cool, so true, comma. And then I want to put in the value for my third column, which in this case is birthday. So I'm going to do 1990-0619, and then a semicolon to close that out. So you'll notice that the second set of parentheses corresponds directly to the first set of parentheses. The first value here after values is always going to match up with the first column name that we put in after the table name. So we can see here that Deidre matches up with name, true matches up with cool, and Deidre's birthday matches up with birthday. So I'm gonna add one more. I'm gonna do an insert space into space new table space, and then in parentheses, I'm just gonna put in a name into the second record, space values, and then I'm gonna give a name value, and then a semicolon at the end. So I am using the new DB. I'm inserting into the table in the first SQL line a name, a cool value, and birthday. Then I'm going to set the values for each of those. Then for the second one, I'm going to insert into that new table just the name, and the value is Hannah. So I'm going to hit run. It says that my query was executed successfully. So now I want to go ahead and take a look at the data that's stored inside of this database or inside this table. So now I want to go ahead and look at the data that's stored inside this table. So underneath of these insert lines, I'm going to type in select space asterisk space from space and then the name of the table followed by a semicolon. So I'm saying select, the asterisk represents everything or all from, and then the table name. So select everything from new table. Let's go ahead and run that. I'm going to scroll down to my results, and I can see now that both me and Deidre are inside of this new table. So you'll also notice that we both have ID numbers. Because we set our ID column to auto increment, those ID values were added automatically and in order. So Deidre was inserted first, so she got the number 1. I was inserted second, so I got the number 2. We'll also see that although I didn't specify here in my insert statement a cool value, it defaulted to true because inside of our schema, we said that the cool column is going to default to true. So let's try a slightly more specific select command. So now I'm going to say select all from new table where name equals Hannah. So select asterisk all from new table where name, that's a column, so I'm looking at a specific column, equals, and then a string with the information that we're looking for, so Hannah. I'm gonna hit run, can scroll down here, and I can see that now this particular query just showed me from the database. We can also limit what columns are being returned. So I'm gonna delete this where part, and I'm gonna change this asterisk to column names. So select name, comma, birthday from new table. So let's hit run. And now I can just see the data being returned shows only the name and birthday columns. So now I want to go ahead and update some of this information. So I'm going to change name and birthday back to an asterisk. And then I'm going to write update space the table name, so new table space set name equals Ming where ID equals 1 semicolon. So here I'm telling SQL that I want to update a specific table. And in this update, I want to set the name value equal to something specific, in this case Ming, wherever the record ID is equal to 1. So SQL is going to look through all the records, it's going to look for 1 with 1 in the ID column, and it's going to set the name equal to Ming wherever it finds that. So I'm going to do another select all from new table, so that way we can see our results, and hit run. So if I look at query number 4, this is the query that happened before I did the update. I still see Deidre and Hannah, but if I scroll down to query number 6, which is the select after we performed the update query, I now see Ming and Hannah. So finally, let's go ahead and delete an entry from the database. So I'm going to go down another line, and I'm going to type in delete from the name of the table, new table, where ID equals 2. So I'm telling SQL that I want to delete from a specific table, in this case, new table, wherever the record's ID is equal to the value of 2. Then let's do another select all from new table, run this. So here is Ming and Hannah before I performed the delete. And in query number 8, which is the query after the delete query was performed, now I just see Ming and I don't see myself because I deleted the record that had an ID of 2.